I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, I'm Molly B. Welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where, as you know, if you listen often, we dive into some pretty scandalous cases, not just here on the Gulf Coast, but well beyond Florida. Joining me, as always, is Pam Hill. She's a victim's advocate. She's experienced violent crime in her own family, and I think we're going to get into some of that that's happened in your sister's case. Also, the case involving her former ex-husband, because the case that we're going to be talking about today, just like so many of these cases that we talk about, has a lot of the same recurring themes, including authority figures abusing their power and their position to molest and sexually abuse people in lesser positions of power, manipulating young girls. If you're not familiar, we're talking about an episode we call Groomed by the Blue Line, the Mysterious Death of Sandra Birchmore. So this is a case that's stemming out of Massachusetts. I know a lot of folks wonder why we cover some of these cases when we're called Gulf Coast Confidential, but it's because, again, we find so many themes that end up touching on either similar stories that we've covered down here on the Gulf Coast, including what happened with your former brother-in-law, Randy Adelot, as well as just within law enforcement here, we've had more than a few sex scandals. And some, more than a few, also involving minors. So we're going to touch on some of those cases too. But before we get into the main story that we're covering today, we want to talk a little bit about what we got coming up. And so, of course, we've got Ben Brown coming up on July 11th. We're going to be doing something on that.
Right. We have a little pop-up podcast for that because it will be Ben Brown Part 7. We're keeping this in parts because it's marching along, and we're going to stay right with the story because you broke it, and so we're just going to keep on going with it.
Yeah, that's right. He's going to be arraigned on the charge of basically negligent homicide for accidentally, according to the sheriff's office, Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office, negligence. Her death was the result of negligence for his wife, Hillary Brown. So we're going to continue to follow that. And also, for those folks who are watching and not listening, if you happen to catch this weird thing in my eye, I just feel compelled I have to explain this weird story. But my cat punched me in the eye. I don't know how it happened. It was just a weird sort of moment. Thankfully, it wasn't like a nail to the eye.
Yeah.
That would have been awful.
Yes.
I feel like I would have had to have gone to the doctor, but instead I was just kind of bent over the waist playing with my cat because it likes to hide under this mat. And I was like, oh, here, play under the mat. And then it just launched and shot and hit me in the face like a furry torpedo and bruised the inside of my eye.
Aww.
And you're the pharmacist. You tell me what it is, but it's created like a big blood blister right there on the white of my eye.
Little blood vessels are broken, a little furry punch in the eye, I reckon.
Mean!
But I'll tell you what not to do. Anytime you have red eyes and stuff, do not use Visine.
Okay, I didn't.
Right. Don't use the vasoconstrictors because it will get the red out, that's for sure. I tell people you can use Visine. I'll recommend it if you have stayed out too late, your eyes are red, and you got a job interview or something, only once, because it works too good. It's like pulling rubber band too much and they pop. Ooh. And then you don't want to stay looking like that.
No,
So just use some natural tears type of thing, maybe cool compresses and stuff, and stay out of Pee Wee Sherma's way.
No kidding. Pee Wee Sherma, just like a furry missile.
You're like Mike Tyson.
Rough. I know. So anyway, hopefully it's not too distracting, but I just wanted to go ahead and give that explanation. But I think we're ready to dive into this latest case here on the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast. Again, we talked about it being on the case of Sandra Birchmore. She was 23 years old when she was found dead in her Canton apartment. This was in February of 2021, February 4th, and they started an internal investigation because this young lady had been involved with the police department there for years. She'd started out in their Explorers program when she was in middle school, and basically it developed into a career. And as we discovered as a result of this internal affairs investigation, as well as the criminal investigation that's now launched into her death, it would appear, that there was a lot of misconduct committed by other members of the police department. It's just exposing just some horrendous culture, if nothing else.
Oh, yeah. It's so disrespectful and so vulgar. That's the only word I can think of it. And it's vulgar to me how other adults that see it can co-sign, double down on it, turn their head, or what have you. And the reason this is popping up, like right now, for many reasons, but this place, Stoughton, or Stoughton, however you say it, is next to Canton, Massachusetts. Well, anybody that's watching court TV or the crime shows or true crime know that the Karen Reed case is happening there. And that's one of her defense that the police department is corrupt and vulgar and, looking for nudes on her phone and stuff. And I don't want to say too much about that because we're working on Karen Reed case. But people are like, where'd this come from? Because this little girl, I want to get some definitions straight first. They'll say an underage woman.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It infuriates me.
Right.
That wording
is a girl,
nuts. Yeah.
right?
A minor.
Right. A minor,
when this
a girl,
abuse started.
a child, a teenager, whatever you want to say. And then when they say inappropriate relations or inappropriate sexual relations, they're under 16, that is rape.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to not use those words, but that's the words that they use. And I correct people when they say, though, I don't like to be going around correcting, but you're not going to call an underage woman. That doesn't even make any sense. That is a child.
I know. And we're going to get into that some more, too. Again, if you're not familiar with Pam's sister situation, Sharon Adelot was murdered by her own son, Brandon Adelot, but found not guilty by reason of insanity, even though he was charged with murder. So now technically he is a killer in the eyes of the law, but he is not a convicted murderer because he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. But this was in December of Christmas Eve of 2013. But 2 years prior to that, in fact, 3 years prior to that, Brandon's parents, Sharon Adelot and Randy Adelot was a coach at Pensacola High School, and he had been busted for, quote unquote, having an inappropriate relationship, according to the Escambia County School District, with a 14-year-old girl. They exchanged hundreds of text messages, many of them sexual, including Randy saying that he would, quote unquote, bang the little girl and bringing cake to her house that his wife had bought him for his birthday, taking it by there, offering to tutor her at a cupcake shop. And they were just, but they defined it as an inappropriate relationship. No, that is a 14-year-old girl. He was a teacher. He was also a coach. He was in a position of authority. An inappropriate relationship is maybe between two coworkers that are the same age, two adults that shouldn't be, messing around for HR reasons or whatever. But this inappropriate relationship in criminal terms to describe a situation like what happened with Randy and that student, as well as what this happened with this young woman, Birchmore, it's just horrendous.
It is.
Now, when this abuse started, she was about middle school age at the time.
13.
Yes. And one of the officers involved even told authorities that he took her virginity. And she came from a troubled life. She'd lost a lot of family members. She looked up to law enforcement. It was her life. And they basically, the picture that is painted is that they groomed and manipulated her from an early age. That this was a teenage girl who didn't have a lot of family support, like a lot of young people, like of all ages people looking for love. And maybe especially when you're young and you don't have any life experience to understand what is healthy and what is not. And they took advantage of that. And we're talking about several people that have been under investigation. Stoughton Police Chief Donna McNamara, she is the one that is, we admire her.
Yeah.
She is certainly trying to take, I think, the helm and lead this investigation now that they're learning more about it over the past several years.
Right. And right this wrong, not necessarily come in and clean up this mess that these 4 miscreants and cads created, So I want us to, she deserves props big time. And you're right. They took a little girl that admired them that had lost her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt. So a lot of the female things that she needed to learn, there's no one there. But they took her in, not in a normal way. And so that bunch of them from 13 to 23, because she admired the authority. She admired the military. So you've got this girl that's, sort of bubbly-eyed and
impressionable.
Yeah, right. So that's where we are.
Yes. And these are 3 of the names of the folks that are involved. Former Stoughton police officer Matthew Farwell, remember that. His twin brother, Officer William William Farwell and Officer Robert Devine, according to the police chief there now, demonstrated serious misconduct in their interactions with Birchmore. So this is information that's coming out of a civil lawsuit that's been filed by family over her death. And recently, we've just gotten new information. Literally, just last month, the family had an independent pathologist take a look at her body, and they said that she died as a result not of suicide by strangulation, but homicide, that she was strangled to death, but she didn't do it to herself. Somebody else did it to her. So I suspect that soon, and according to this police chief, she said that she's very disturbed by this new information, and she all but said we're launching. I think she did say we're looking into this. We're having an investigation. So I think the state attorney's office is involved as well.
Oh, definitely. Well, and the expert that they called was Dr. Michael Bodden. He did the OJ case, Martin Luther King, and he did Kobe Bryant and JFK assassination reviews and stuff. So, I mean, this is the man that said no, because everything was going along good when everybody thought that she had hung herself with a lanyard. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, I think.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. Yeah. But so pretty much right off the bat, she was 23 when she died. They found her body in the apartment. It was ruled by the medical examiner's office there a suicide. But it wasn't until this internal affairs report came out with all these lurid and toxic and just, like you said, vulgar details about what was actually happening in this department and Birchmore's relationship with these men and how they had taken advantage of her and abused her consistently. That's when they really started to take a harder look at the case. And it was the timing of the Karen Reed case happening right next door, similar allegations. This is all part of an environment, a culture of just police fostering this sort of abuse within the ranks. And we've seen similar cases right here in Escambia County. So it's not a stretch to believe that this kind of thing happens. But that being said, I do want to say that I know plenty of more officers who are good and honorable than those that aren't. But unfortunately, it's cases like this that draw headlines and people talk about it. But so according to this internal affairs investigation, the results that came out I think a year or two after she had passed, Birchmore was 13 years old when she met police officer Matthew Farwell through the department's, get this, y'all, Youth Explorers program. This little baby was a middle schooler, and he's eyeing her. He allegedly began an inappropriate relationship, they say, with Birchmore when she was 15 and he was 27. Not inappropriate relationship. That is basically sex abuse of a minor. And so the report concluded that all three men who Birchmore had met through that department's same now defunct Youth Explorers program all had inappropriate sexual relationships with her, and that Matthew Farwell, who was 12 years her senior, married, also had an ongoing sexual affair with her that began when she was 15 and lasted shortly before her death. In fact, he is the one who is alleged to be the father of her baby that she was pregnant with at the time. Right. She allegedly committed suicide.
Yeah. These characters, can I tell you about them?
Yeah, please. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm ready. I was just trying to set the stage.
Yeah. Well, the first one you got is Robert Devine. He's the chief of police. He was making $122,000 in 2014, so it's not a little...
Yeah, that was a good salary for sure.
Yeah, so I guess he's willing to risk it. But his wife's a police officer, too, and he basically, when he got caught, he said, oh, I've done nothing wrong. And what he had done, he's brilliant. He had he created this other persona that he could hide behind. He's a big, strapping man, handsome enough. And so he would go to the library and read Dr. Seuss, the places you can go. And then he would bust other corrupt cops and turn them in. So he was award-winning, and everybody looked up to him. And so he basically ran the after-school program and the paramilitary. He had an affair with another lady, and this got back and forth. They're tacky as they can be. Both of them got revenge porn going on back and forth.
Good Lord, so classy.
Yeah, sending text and stuff. And then he hollers out, I'm a victim. So, I mean, this is some...
He's a selective victim.
Right. We could get into all this. And so this crazy lady he was, fooling around with sent his wife some flowers and an ugly note. So that got that started. But he's the one that oversee
this program?
Right. Started it. he was the first one. Now, Matthew and William Farwell are twins. And they were kind of like mischievous boys in Stoughton when they grew up. They both pretended like they were policemen and pulled people over. So let's keep that in their history.
Yes.
Okay. And they're kind of like creep and creepier, dumb and dumber, weird and weirder.
Well, it sounds like they fed off of each other.
Yeah. And so Matthew was the canine. They do stuff to get in a target-rich environment.
Of course.
Yeah, let me go read books to children
Like
at
a
the
typical
library.
predator.
Yeah, let me be the after-school resource officer. Let me do the canine, and let me act like I'm helping this little girl over here that doesn't have a lot of her family. So he's basically a little low-stepper, and 4 days before they found Sandra, they have a picture of him in the going into the elevator at her apartment.
Yes. I
Got
know,
a
that's
hoodie
interesting.
on, got his face turned away from the camera, and she had just walked up. She had like a Swiffer or something, some sort of mop in her hand. So he followed her up there, and he's just up there for 20 minutes and came back out. But they said during that time, his wife was having a baby over at a hospital close by. So keep all this in mind. That's what's going on with Matthew.
Yeah, they said it would constitute statutory rape in the state of Massachusetts because the age of consent is 16.
Exactly. And so basically they call it an inappropriate relationship. They kind of got busted on that. But his brother William, he's kind of even more low stepper than
They
Matthew.
said that he tried to introduce Birchmore to other men, that they were basically all, quote unquote, passing her around like a toy.
Yeah, they pimped her out, and they did it on the clock, and they laughed and carried on about it. But then there's a fourth guy, bad guy 1, bad guy 2, bad guy 3. Bad guy 4 thought he was going to be covered because he had been a Stoughton police officer, but he was somewhere else. But they couldn't find him. And you know how this is, and I do too, from reading reports. They're highly redacted, okay? But we read them anyway because somewhere through there, they always mess it up. They left the name in there, Joshua Hill, like the heel of your foot, Heal. And so he was over in the next little towns over, Abington. So he's sitting over there thinking everything's good with him. He's about 40. He's an older man. He, too, is fooling around being the resource officer and the K-9. You need a younger person for the school resource officer. But so everybody thought, this is weird and square peggish, but whatever. So he basically got in trouble. He's the one that said he took advantage so much of Sandra. She saw a little cat because he's an animal officer too, animal control officer, and so a little orphaned cat. He exchanged that with her for oral sex.
Oh my God!
He is so sickening, and so he did that at this little office or place there. And then he got in trouble. He thought he was a hip old guy, and he did just what my brother-in-law did right here. He thought, well, I'm fixing to get the union to come in here and help me. But the union did not help him because that's what happens. They move these people around. Let's just say...
Passing the trash.
Yeah, that's what they call it. There's bad people in every profession. There's more good people, but we're talking about this bunch here. They take these officers, move them around, give them a different title, sit them at a desk, do something. Same thing with teachers. They just move them to a different school and go, hope nobody catches. It's called the lemon dance. You move your lemon around instead of addressing it straight on. That is why I love this lady, Donna McNamara. So there we are with her.
Yeah, no, she has definitely stepped up because this whole town of Stoughton and the Stoughton Police Department are named in defendants of this wrongful death lawsuit as well. So both the Farwell brothers and Devine have resigned from that department, and now the chief of police, who we were just talking about, admire her stance on this, McNamara, has asked for the state's new Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission to decertify all three of them so that they can no longer be police officers anywhere, which I think is fantastic because there are certain examples that I've seen just right here covering cases here in Northwest Florida where police officers who were known to be abusers were allowed to go on, resign, and move on to another department where oftentimes they just continue the same behavior, and we see it over and over again.
Right. Well, and if you're going to use somebody, you're going to use a lot of somebodies because Joshua, I think that's his name, the one Hill, he is with the domestic violence victim now. He is left his wife that stood by him through all this stuff. So it's just just, I can't, the word, it's such a weird word, but it's cad. They just so caddish to me, you know?
Yeah, I know. And I think that when you get around other like-minded individuals, it almost like it encourages them to continue in they justify each other's deviancy.
Yeah, or hide it.
Yeah.
You know, because that's
Definitely
what I said.
hide it.
Somebody that doesn't get indignant about hearing about something like this, or bullying, or abusing, if you don't get some sort of indignant, methinks thou likes to do that too.
Right. I know. It's like a lot of these cases where you cover and then people want to jump at you for bringing it up. Like, why aren't you upset about the facts of the case?
Yeah.
But I can think of 3 off the top of my head. I mean, 2015, you had the Mannings, a couple that had a teenage daughter at the time. They were both paramedics for Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. That's the Fort Walton Beach area, for those who aren't familiar. That's about an hour and a half east of Pensacola. But they lived in Escambia County, which is where Pensacola is, and they had relationships. The mother they had an open marriage, if you will, and the mom was having sex with a number of sheriff's deputies. And then her daughter ends up getting caught up in this. And so this couple's charged with, any number of things, including child neglect and allowing their daughter to be abused. And this little girl was all caught up in this horrendous, but there were multiple officers involved. There were multiple people involved that could have and should have known better and didn't, and they participated.
Who thinks that's right? I mean, I want to know who thinks that's right, and then going to get the union behind you and double down. Devine, the chief of police, he's a lawyer now, and he said, I'm going to fight this as hard as I can.
Well, sure, because it's just trying to save his own reputation instead of admitting what he did.
Right, and one of these creepier work for TSA. They just move around.
Yeah, and all these guys deny any wrongdoing.
Yeah, well,
to that point, and they haven't been tried. So in that regard, this is what the reports say. But these men say that they are absolutely innocent. But going back to your point about how you said Devine was with a woman now that he had met on a domestic violence call. Joshua Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, or Heel.
Right, Heel, like Heal.
H-E-A.
Not like my name.
Because you said the heel of your foot, that's H-E-E-L. So, but
I'm
it's
sorry.
heel like H-E-A-L, and then you're Pam Hill, H-I-L-L.
Well, I didn't say it was brilliant.
No, I'm just making sure. So, good old heel. But it reminds me of another case, yet again, like a long time ago. I remember this deputy, I had heard through the grapevine that he had been busted for having sex with a 14-year-old girl that he had met on a call. And I believe, if memory serves me, that it was possibly domestic violence related, some sort of, complaint that he had arrived and he had met her. And they began a quote unquote inappropriate relationship. And they had done an internal affairs investigation, found where there was DNA evidence indicating that they had had sexual interactions in his patrol car. She'd held his gun, I guess, in a substation. So there had just been these rendezvous in numerous places. And I think that she had had a pregnancy scare. And then that's how it kind of started to come to light, because he either was a resource officer or maybe he knew the resource officer. Somehow or another, it had started to leak through the student body that she had this relationship with this officer. And I remember I went to the sheriff at the time and I said, I'm hearing about this and I hear about this internal affairs investigation. Are you looking into this? Mm-hmm. And this particular sheriff, who's no longer sheriff, was absolutely adamant that I was not going to do this story. He wasn't going to provide me any information. He wasn't going to hold this guy accountable. And for the record, this particular sheriff also had a reputation for when he used to do security, they all often have side jobs. Mm-hmm. And Pensacola Beach and a couple of other places, like what's now known as the Bay Center, where they would have concerts, were popular choices because they pay well and it's regular work. Mm-hmm. It's regular side work, like any government job. They're not rolling in the dough, but it's nice to have these side jobs. In Pensacola Beach, of course you're going to want to work a side job. It's beautiful out there. But some of these guys had the reputation for, they're young, picking up girls, but this particular sheriff and some others also had the reputation for when they worked security before this guy became sheriff, maybe going too far, if you will, with some of the minor girls. So that's what's in my mind as I'm hearing him push back and telling me I'm not going to give you any information. And I was like, well, there's no way I'm stopping finding this story. So I went through the Escambia School District at the time, and I worked with their public information officer. I said, can you tap into basically the school system and find out if you're hearing anything about this? And he did. He found out which school this girl attended. He contacted the principal for me on my behalf. The principal wanted to talk about what happened. He was actually absolutely horrified by this relationship. He was astonished that there was going to be no accountability for this deputy. So the sheriff had denied my request repeatedly throughout the entire day for an interview about what had happened and to confirm that it had happened at all. And then when I found an alternate way to confirm, I was in that principal's office getting ready to turn on the camera for the interview. And then I get a call that basically the sheriff now said, yes, we're taking a look at this. He's been immediately placed on administrative leave. That officer ended up in prison for what he did with that child.
That's exactly where he should be. And see, that gives me hope. There's a good man or woman in the process. That's what, that saying I love so much. The only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
But it shows, too, the power of institutions.
Yes.
Like, he was going to put the squash down on that story. And if it hadn't been for the good people of the Escambia School District at that time, then there was no way I was going to be able to independently confirm through reliable sources, if you will, what had happened.
Right.
Because they kept the reports from me. It would have taken legal action, this, that, and the other on the sheriff's office part. But because the school district stepped up, but what if you don't? Like, fast forward to Randy Adelot in 2010, basically, when he was accused, this phone that he was using to exchange inappropriate text with this 14-year-old student in his science class. She loses her phone. It's discovered supposedly by two other girls. They see these inappropriate texts between her and Coach A, as they called him. And then you have the entire Escambia School District, according to their own internal affairs report, they all discussed this. A coach there at his school, the principal at his school, the woman who was the PPD officer at the time, Pensacola Police Department detective that investigated sexual abuse cases against children. She also had a son that played football for Pensacola High School. All of them admitted in this report that they met at the field house at Pensacola High School when this phone was first determined. And instead of like sounding the alarm and saying we need to immediately launch an investigation, it was how can we throw the book at these two girls that found this case? So it's the exact opposite. And this is what happens when institutions can easily bury something when they all work together and call you crazy for trying to get to the truth.
Yep. Oh, yeah. But here, this right here is encouraging to me. This is 10 years ago. And they're going, everybody gets caught. Sun is the best disinfectant there is. Like that bunch out there at Pensacola. My sister wouldn't be dead if they would have done the next right thing, because the school system doubled down, even used words like squash. Randy told Sharon, Mr. Williams is going to squash this, the principal, and just be quiet. Sharon, my sister's dead because she's the only one that cared about the little girl that Randy was trying to have sex with. So, I get real upset about that, and I get real upset that these people are still clustered up together. I'm dealing with them right now, 10 years later, on this case and stuff. I will never forget what they did, and I will hold them accountable, and I will never stop talking about it. Like this case right here. This case, I understand 100%. I understand a case that's going on, I think, over in Perdido about a mother that son drowned or what have you, and there's the community, right? The community's trying to squash her and sue her. I've been through this frustration. You just never stop talking because it seems like they're rewarding the people that do the bad guy stuff, like this stuff,
Right. And the only thing I can think of motivation-wise is they're trying to avoid bad press or a potential lawsuit. But the cover-up is almost always worse than the crime.
It always is, because if you just tell the truth and just have some morals and honor, any of those people, I wouldn't want any of those people back around kids, but they still around kids at various lemon
one of them is
sites.
like an Escambia School District board member.
Yeah. And one's a head coach somewhere.
Yes.
They're still doing it. And to me, they do it in the darkness, and they do it around like-minded people. If you put them around some decent people, let's just even say a handful of them, they ought to fall on their face with this wicked, nasty, trying to get with little children, little young teenagers and stuff. It makes me so mad that I have to watch myself. It makes me so mad. I get so much anxiety about it. But I mean, this was 10 years ago. This little girl, she was a happy little girl. She tried to be happy in spite of not having a mama, a grandmama, or an aunt. She went and those men knew that she adored them, and that's what they did to her.
Used her and abused her, and then when it was going to get them in trouble, decided to eliminate the witness.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Exactly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. But also just keeping on doing it and giggling about it like they're little girls, giggling and passing around and acting like they're some sort of testosterone Ted. You know, you got to be some kind of impotent, ignorant person to think that you can go and have sex with a child. You need counseling.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And for those who have not, would like some more details, if you're interested in learning more about what happened with Randy Adelot and his sexting scandal and how he lost his job, you can check out our episode, Confessions in the Field House. And that is an episode, it's basically a chapter right out of the book that I've been working on about Sharon Adelot's case that describes exactly how that whole sexting scandal went down, who knew what and when, and it is all taken from certifiable reports that came from the source themselves, from the Escambia School District. They knew exactly what was going on. They did take steps to fire him, but no criminal charges were ever filed against him because the very police officer who was brought in by the coach and the principal to help sweep it under the rug was the one that it was assigned to. Mm-hmm. And I did talk to her manager later on, her supervisor, who said that it's unlikely he would have faced criminal charges anyway, but that it would have ended up on a watch list of some kind. But, you know, it's impossible to say. And of course, you're going to say that now in hindsight.
Right.
But,
well, the little girl, the 14-year-old girl, ended up, she has been in and out of jail 9 times. She's listed as homeless. She wanted to be a model, I think, and she was pretty, she was cute, little Hispanic girl. Her mom hadn't lived the right life, and people basically were like, well, she's trash, he can use her or whatever, you know, and it just makes me so upset. I can't even believe the people, I went to people I thought that were authority, I thought they would have some morals and integrity, but I was wrong.
I know. Well, and I think that's what people assume with any sort of institution, especially when it comes to law enforcement. And again, I would say 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a quality human being who's in that role, in that position. But that when you do have those that aren't, they seem to find each other, and then the worst seems to happen. Like we've seen just here right at home, talking about the Manning case, and then in this case in Stoughton, Massachusetts. But it was interesting. So when this pathologist that was hired by the family to do the independent autopsy issued that report saying the cause of death was strangulation and the manner of death homicide, and this is all according to the Boston Globe, we love her, but Chief Donna McNamara said, while I am not a trained medical examiner and I am not qualified to draw any direct conclusions, the findings certainly warrant further examination at the highest level. So she is absolutely going to take this, and I'm looking forward to following it, to seeing if they do decide to file any criminal charges. And like you mentioned, they started looking at it. Matthew Farwell was the last one to see her alive. There is video of him with a hoodie, basically turning his face away from the camera. And then, you know, at least that was the last time she was heard from after he left.
And he said they had a nasty argument. That's what he said, quote unquote. We just had a nasty argument. And, you know, Chief McNamara, she's given plenty of statements. She's not shying away from this. She's like, this is wrong. This child did not get a sliver of justice. Those are her words, not mine. And then she said, this hurts me as a human being and a police officer. And she said, we are going to train and retrain those that wear the badge. And I think what happens is, like you said, I think 99% of them are probably good folks, you know, but this bunch that does that, they get together. It's like a little incestuous bunch of ignorant people.
And a power trip.
Yeah. And can you imagine saying, you're out amongst your buddies and you go, hey, I had sex with a 14-year-old.
I know. And
it's
then,
so
like, when's
sick.
my turn?
Yeah, just sick MFers. I'm sorry.
It
you know,
is.
but I mean, just so sick. And I think what happens if good people go tell on them, they get in trouble because they're like, you upset an apple cart.
That's exactly
you know,
right.
Don't be telling stuff. We like it like this. You know, we got our little paycheck over here and we can do this.
In our
but
free
they do
time.
that. Right. If you are a sexual deviant, I don't care what profession you're in, you need to tell on the sexual deviants in your profession.
Absolutely. I agree. And it's interesting, too. Local media obviously has been covering the case pretty extensively. And in one article that I found, there's a quote that's contributed to WBZ, and it's a quote from a friend of Sandra's, and her name is Natalie Alves, and she told this media outlet that she'd been hoping for development in the case. This is her reaction to the independent pathologist saying that it was homicide. She goes, quote, "I don't think she's going to commit suicide if she wanted a baby. No way, no how," Alves said. "I've been wanting something to happen to put whoever did it in jail." So, and then, of course, Matthew Farwell, he said he only had sex with Birchmore 2 or 3 times in 2020.
That makes it okay.
But then after multiple interviews, it's come out, more, of course, more and more that he acknowledged to investigators that he did take her virginity when she was a minor. And supposedly he went to her apartment the day that February 1st, 2021, a few days before she was found, to reportedly end their relationship.
Yeah, their relationship, in the sexual assaulting, in the raping. You know, when she's 23, that's not the case. But, you know, they messed up her mind. They messed up her spirit. When you rape someone, you take their spirit. You steal from them. And to even be able to stand up as a person and say that you enjoyed that or you did that or you giggled about that is disgusting to me.
Yeah, this is sick. And then in this other, a few more details out of this other article, it talked about, despite confessing only to those encounters, Farwell acknowledged to investigators that he went to her apartment on that day reportedly to end the relationship. And while several friends of Birchmore's have told the Globe that Matthew Farwell was the father of her unborn child, he has denied paternity and blocked Birchmore on all communication platforms after visiting her home on February 1st. Well, I guess so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Trying to set up a little alibi for himself, potentially.
Yeah. Well, the Dumb and Dumber, Creep and Creepier, and Joshua, they all like to get on the internet and post stuff and act like they're teenagers and stuff. We've seen this before with people acting like that. And all their accounts are deactivated now, and it's just so predictable. You can see it.
Well, I'm happy to see that they have a woman in charge who is wanting justice and who is willing to do the right thing, and hopefully it will give other people hope who are in positions where they're seeing bad things happen to good people, and they're in a position to speak up and say something, because it is hard.
Right.
There are consequences when you're the only one trying to do the right thing.
Right. And the thing is, this little girl did not deserve that, and hopefully they will get that all taken care of. But my eye is on the new attorney, Devine. I'm going to keep my eyes on him because I want to find out what kind of defense you have to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I mean, I get so mad.
I know. No. It's understandable. I mean, it's good. It's self-righteous anger, I think, to a great extent on her behalf and for other victims out there, too. That is it for Groomed by the Blue Line, the mysterious death of Sandra Birchmore. We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, y'all. And you can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe. We will just so appreciate it.
Subscribe.
All right. See you next time.